Greetings and salutations. Today I'll be talking to Robert Simon, who I've known for a number of years. I've interviewed him before on a previous project called Foodology. Today we're doing something different. We're talking about elderhood and the messages we'd like to convey to younger people. Robert Simon, I'm going to let you speak for yourself. Please just start with giving us a little bit about your background, your professional career, and then we'll dig into your wisdom.
Okay. Some of this may be interesting, some of it may not be, but hopefully it's relevant. I think we are a product of our environment and how we were raised and who we were raised with and by. And in my case, both my father and my uncle were lawyers, and they both went to TCU and they both went to the University of Texas. And so I went to the University of Texas, and I took my undergraduate and my law degree at the University of Texas. And then I went back to Fort Worth and I became corporate counsel for a company called Pier 1 Imports that has a number of retail outlets across the country. And the other part of this, I guess, if we're talking about education, was that I came of age in the age of Sputnik and the beginnings of the realization by the U.S. that the Russians may be ahead of us in terms of our exploration of science and technology in the universe. And what happened in Texas at that time was they tested kids, I guess, or had kids nominated for what they called rapid learning. And those were special in-school classes to teach what they considered the more gifted, intelligent, whatever you want to call it, kids, to advance them more quickly so that they might compete more effectively with the Russians. And I was among that group. And what basically happened was that from the 7th grade through college, undergraduate, I was in advanced learning classes, and basically shunted through the system on a track with other kids that were deemed to be a little smarter than the average bear, I guess. Anyway, that worked fine until I got at the university. I had, when I was in high school, I won the chess championship and the economics championship for my high school. They gave awards in those days for the best students in different courses. And I was always geared towards economics and finance. When I got to the university, I had automatic acceptance to Plan 2 at the University of Texas, which was, again, an academic track within the university. I went the first day and I decided I did not want to be regular undergraduate. I looked at the catalog, and in the catalog they had courses in the catalog that carried an title and a business school title. So I walked across the street and I talked to the people at the business school, and I discovered that the business school had what was called an honors program, which again was one of these academic tracks within the normal curriculum. And I got to so they said, well, we don't have Plan 2, but we have honors program and you can be in it. I said, okay, I'll do that. So I went through undergraduate in the honors program and got a degree in finance, and then in 3 years, and because I had taken summer courses at TCU, and I was able to get out of undergraduate in 3 years through my additional courses I took. And I went to law school in 1967, went the regular track 3 years through law school, and graduated. And I then was in an international students organization that found jobs for people overseas and exchanged them for jobs in the United States. And we had Dell Technologies jobs for people, and we traded those. And I took a job in 1968 in Denmark, and then for the summer, and then I took a job that was in Copenhagen, and then I took a job in Gothenburg or Göteborg, Sweden, in 1970 for a year abroad in auditing. So I was doing accounting and doing balance sheet accounting for international companies like Hasselblad and Saab and those people that did international accounting with a Swedish accounting firm. Yeah, you mentioned Dostanding, and I speak very little Swedish, even though I took some when I was there. But I've always been a collector. I've always collected. And I don't know where that came from, but I had a stamp collection and I had a coin collection when I was younger and enjoyed the company of stamp collectors and coin collectors. And we would meet weekly at a Willard Jackson's office in downtown Fort Worth, and I would sit around with people like Amon Carter Jr. and Willard Jackson and other people who were, I guess, preeminent collectors, and learned how they operated and how they collected. And I became interested in collecting. And as time went on, I began to collect art and then cowrie shells, and I collect food recipes and through my travel, as you know. And I also became a pretty good cook because my mother was a gourmet cook and had a gourmet cooking school. And from a very young age, like 12 or 14, I would help her prep for her courses, her classes. And she taught in our house. So we would cook and test the recipes. And at those nights that she did cook one of the dishes or several of the dishes, we would sit around the table at dinner, and we would go around the table, and she would ask each of us at the table, my brother and I and my father, what did you think about the food? What did you taste? And so we had to verbalize what we were tasting. And that, I guess, built my palate. I say by osmosis, but I learned what good food was and how it tasted and how it was made and
articulate it.
Yes. And so from a very young age, when I was 14 in 1960, we went to Europe for one of those extended family 8-week tours or whatever it was. And I had to gain permission from my junior high school then. And they said, well, in lieu of the course material, if you will keep a journal and show us your journal when you return, we will consider that fulfillment of your curriculum. And so I did. And I've journaled ever since. And as you know, Greg, I journal all the time, every day. What I eat, what I drink, where I shop, what I buy, what I cook.
It's extraordinary.
And so that has been a part of my life. And I guess what I'm trying to tell people, young people, is embrace what your experience has been and try to gravitate towards those things which you enjoy and enrich your life. And if you get lucky enough to pick something that is remunerative, all the better, because then you can expand your scope of interest to those things that you love, in addition to that which fulfills you from a revenue and life-sustaining standpoint. And I guess what I would say is that you sort of carry that love along with you. So I started collecting art, for example, and when I was 18 years old, I bought my first picture, which was an Eskimo print. And I think in those days, you would send your $50 or $60 to the Canadian government office for Eskimo art. And in this case, it was Cape Dorset was the art location that was sponsored by the Canadian government. And I've collected ever since then. And I probably now have over 300 works of art. And mostly local artists, New Mexican. Yeah, Greg Gould. I have several Greg Goulds that he's been kind enough to give me over the years. And they're lovely, and I love them, and I love, I guess, all of these things. So if you find something that you really love, I think you should pursue it and turn your hobbies and turn your interest into a remunerative part of your life and a enriching part of your life as you find things that you enjoy to collect. And it can be food, as you and I know. Food is enriching. When I go to a restaurant, I will go to fancy restaurants that cook exceptional cuisine of the highest haute cuisine order. And I will go to the least interesting atmospheric restaurants that cook the most enriching regional cuisine that you can find anywhere. And I love them both. If you enjoy food and you understand food, you will enjoy eating almost everywhere. I mean, I'm sure we could go to McDonald's and find something interesting if we wished.
Might I interject the doghouse?
Yes.
Which is right around the corner.
Yes. Yeah. It doesn't have to be far. My personal favorites, as long as we're on the topic, are some of the regional cuisine restaurants in Albuquerque. I like the East Ocean for Chinese food. I like Mary and Tito's for the traditional New Mexican cuisine. We could go on, but there are 4 or 5 around here that are very inexpensive and very delicious. And then when you start talking about expensive, it gets a little more difficult because many restaurants try and many fail at the higher level, I think, to be truly creative.
I'll point out that you eat better at home than a lot of those high-end restaurants.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, let's talk about that for a moment. Because I was trained by osmosis to cook great food, gourmet food, and educated in great food because we went to great restaurants, in France and the US. I learned early on that the secret is freshness and quality. And for example, I'll just tell you what we ate last night for dinner. We didn't have anything planned, but we have a garden. And we went, and my partner, Suzette, picked the fresh lettuce growing in our garden and shaved a radish and chopped a little bit of green onion and made a salad with maybe some tomatoes. And I then took a dozen frozen pot stickers from Costco, these dumplings you buy in the bag. And I sauteed them. You put them frozen in a pan with some peanut oil and sesame oil, and you fry them and saute them in that until they turn golden brown. And I made a little bit of a dipping sauce with soy and mirin and sake and green onions, because we don't like a lot of spice, but if I wanted to spice it, I would have added the garlic chili sauce or chili oil, which is what the recipe calls for. And I'm also now on a low sodium diet. So instead of just all soy and chili oil and green onion, I added the sake and the mirin to lighten it up and give it a little more breadth of flavor across the spectrum of flavors, like sake and mirin are sweeter and more lighter than soy. Anyway, I made that, and then Suzette said, well, rather than just dipping the pot stickers in the sauce, why don't we use the sauce for a salad dressing for the salad? And then, so what we did was I cut my pot stickers, in half, and she did hers, made it a garnish on the salad, and made a pot sticker salad dressed with this dressing.
You know what comes to mind is that when I cook at home, I spice things just the way I like it. So at a restaurant, we're dealing with pleasing a larger audience. At home, we can be very specific with our taste profiles.
Yes. Yes, I guess what I would say, since we're now talking about that, is that you really need to be very aggressive at a restaurant if you're going to end up with something that you can eat and wish to eat. So for example, when I just had a bout where I had to go to the hospital, and I came out, and I have a genetic condition which causes me to lose my musculature if I have an incident that overtaxes my muscles. And I was put on a low sodium diet. Or do we need to change anything?
No, we're fine.
Thank you. And I one of my favorite restaurants is Vietnam 2000 at the corner of Zuni and San Mateo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I went there, and they have a dish that I like very much that is unique to their menu, and it's a broad noodle laid over a bed of cucumber and bean sprouts that have been sautéed, and a little bit of herbs, and then they put on the top of the noodles whatever topping you want, garnished. And I like the egg rolls they make very much, and they also have a grilled pork that's been marinated that's lovely that I like. So that was what I ordered. Normally that dish is served with fish sauce, and fish sauce, as you know, is highly sodium rich because you ferment the fish in the salt. So you have to adjust all of that. So what I did was I went and I thought, what can I do to ameliorate the sodium in this dish? And I kept saying, I want this dish, number 87, but I that may be the fish, the duck soup. But anyway, I want that dish, but with no salt. And I kept saying, no salt, no salt, no salt. So what happened was they brought the dish out, and it didn't have any of the fish sauce. But the liquid in the saute, they had sauteed everything to the point where there was beginning to be a homogeneous sauce within the bean sprouts and the cucumbers. They were yielding their liquid. And I could then douse the noodles and the other things and mix it with those elements and enjoyed the dish. And what I've discovered is that if you eliminate salt, you begin to taste the ingredients. You know what I mean?
I do.
And that's created a whole new aspect to dining. So there are things you can do, and I can't eat black pepper. I'm allergic, sort of. I gag. And so, unfortunately or fortunately, who knows what, my palate has developed to the point where I become very sensitive to things. And especially these things that, as you suggest, they sort of pile into the food to give it, quote, flavor, that are cheap, like salt and pepper. And instead of going to the trouble of creating an enriched, homogeneously unique sauce. So, but if you know how the food is made, you can pick a dish like that one I picked at Vietnam 2000 that has the potential to have in it the elements that can create a satisfying sauce and a satisfying meal.
I routinely coach my clients on their ability to cook. And I tell them, if you don't know how to prepare a meal and satisfy your guests, you're lacking a critical skill.
Yeah, I think that's true. But on the other hand, my mother used to tell people, I follow the Julia Child philosophy, which is you do your best, you present it, and that's it. You've done your best. Now, that doesn't mean, like you were saying, that you shouldn't learn, to cook. You have to learn. And you know, for example, the first lesson my mother always gave in her cooking class was how to make an omelet. If you can make an omelet, you've opened up a whole world of cuisine. For example, this morning for breakfast, we had bought some of these exotic orange oyster and lobster mushrooms at the Santa Fe farmers market last week, which I think is perhaps the other part of what you're encouraging people to do, which is to seek out fresh quality ingredients. And that helps immensely. So I made a mushroom omelet for breakfast with shallot, three types of mushroom, portobello, orange oyster, and the lobster, the long lobster mushrooms. And we made a delicious omelet, a 4-egg omelet, and that was breakfast. So I will also, like a few days ago, I make my own gravid lox or smoked salmon, and I made a smoked salmon, goat cheese, and red onion omelet, which is the other end of the spectrum. It's sort of the Eastern European Jewish tradition, right? But combined it with the French tradition, which is this elegant presentation with, and this morning in the mushroom omelet, I added grape tomatoes and avocado. So it was a pretty heavy, thick omelet.
These are fusion.
Yes, yes. But once you have, the point I'm trying to make is, if you start with the elemental bases of the cuisines, whether it be Chinese or French or Vietnamese or whatever your tradition is, you will create within that, using the fresh ingredients that are available, delicious food that you and others will love eating.
You warm my heart. So, Robert, we're going to conclude. I'd like you to have the last word. Again, I've picked up numerous ideas from you about young people learning how to cook.
If I may, let me do the other track, if I may.
Sure.
And you can edit it however you wish. So the other part of this, as I had mentioned in the beginning, was that my father and uncle were lawyers, and I followed in their path, and I became a lawyer. But I was convinced and compelled to believe that my future practice and enjoyment as a lawyer would be within the areas of finance and economics. And so I became the corporate counsel for Pier 1 Imports as a commercial business, as a corporate attorney. And I also began to explore finance for investing in the stock market. And my mother also was interested in investing in the stock market. So she encouraged me, and I developed an interest in investing in stocks. And I learned pretty early on that if you begin to acquire assets that will work for you as you develop wealth, that you can build your wealth and it will provide you supplemental income, and you can enjoy these food and collecting through the benefits that come from the acquisition of additional wealth and income through investing. And over the years, I've continued to invest. And I guess what I'd like to tell young people is that as you get older, you are less able to work and you will get sick and you will need the benefit of income, supplemental income, and resources in your life to sustain yourself. And there's no better way to do it than to acquire those assets which will provide you revenue in the future if you need it. I am a third generation commercial real estate family member. My grandfather was one of the first commercial real estate developers and owners in Fort Worth, Texas. My father developed and owned real estate in Fort Worth. So I've continued that, and I own real estate, commercial retail real estate. And that provides me, and my mother did also. So I now have current income from real estate that I have bought, paid the notes off, and now cash flow revenue to me monthly. And I also have continued to invest in the stock market. And I also have built my wealth so that if I need to have additional wealth to buy art or to take a trip to Europe or whatever I want to do, I had to go to fancy restaurants and pay my credit card. I have that ability through this development of wealth. So I think I have to encourage people to begin to save and to develop streams of revenue and increased wealth at an early age if they can. And that will then, through the time value of money, begin to accrue benefits in their older age that will allow them to supplant the loss of income from the lack of work that they are. I practice very little law now, but I spend a lot of time looking at the stock market and looking at art auctions.
It's another career.
Like you're doing here, beginning to collect these conversations about what people have done in their life and what they think others would benefit from. And mine is just this small, unique aspect of it.
Thank you so much, Robert Simon.
Thank you, Greg. I love what you're doing and always have. And if there's anything else that I can do to be a part of it, I'd love to.
Wonderful.